Welcome to Theology in Motion. My name is Steve Zank, and on behalf of the Center for Worship Leadership at Concordia University, Irvine, we're glad that you are here. Theology in Motion is a podcast where we survey the theology of Christian worship from a Lutheran theological perspective. And we've missed you the last few months. We've been growing and expanding. It's been a great season. It required us to spend a little more time on administration than we normally do. And now we're getting back to the podcast, and we could be more excited releasing new content. Today's episode is a behind the music of the latest Psalm library release, Psalm 1, That Man. As you get into the conversation with Chad, Bird, Ben Lange, and Kip Fox on their new song, click here. There's resources we have available for you about the song, Spotify links, charts, all kinds of things. And welcome back. We're glad to have you. And enjoy this conversation with Kip Fox, Chad Bird, and Ben Lange.
Hey everybody, my name is Kip Fox. I'm the director of the Songwriter Initiative of the Center for Worship Leadership at Concordia University, Irvine. Thanks for joining us. Today we have two very special guests, my co-writers on the new song, That Man, based on Psalm 1, as a part of the Center for Worship Leadership's Psalm Library Initiative. Let me start by telling you a little bit about our guests. Chad Bird is a scholar in residence at 1517. He's served as a pastor, professor, and guest lecturer in Old Testament and Hebrew. He holds master's degrees from Concordia Theological Seminary and Hebrew Union College. He's contributed articles to Christianity Today, the Gospel Coalition, Modern Reformation, The Federalist, Lutheran Forum, and other journals and websites. He's also the author of several books, including Night Driving and Your God is Too Glorious. Chad, welcome.
Thank you, Kip. Good to be here.
Our other writer on this song is Ben Lange. Ben is a worship leader at Faith Oakville in St. Louis, Missouri. Music has always provided a beautiful and powerful connection point between him and Jesus. Married with two small boys, Ben loves making a joyful noise with his cacophonous crew, banging on the living room piano and an old guitar. Since high school, songwriting has been a vehicle for worship and praise in his personal life. And at church, he is passionate about leading fellow believers in worship, and also feels called to equip the next generation of worship leaders, working with students and young adults. Ben, thanks for being here.
Kip, thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, let me just let everybody know we're going to break it down here for the audience. We're going to talk today, first of all, we're going to talk through the theology of Psalm 1, and Chad is going to walk us through that. Then we're going to talk through the progression of how Ben and I kind of went back and forth on writing it. And then we're going to talk through the back and forth between Ben and I and Chad as we worked through the theology and all the different pieces that went into making this song happen. So that's what we're going to do. So let's start with the theology. Chad, when we decided on Psalm 1, and I came to you and asked you to give me everything you had on Psalm 1, can you break down for me your approach and your work and really what Psalm 1 is about?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So one of the first things I think that I pointed out is that, well, Psalm 1, of course, as the first psalm, it's the gateway. It's a gateway to the entire Psalter. And as you would expect, a gateway is going to provide not just an entrance, but also kind of a guide to what you could expect in the rest of the Psalms. So there's a number of features in Psalm 1 that are going to pop up in the rest of the Psalms. And one of the things I love about Psalm 1 is the way that it opens. And that is going to provide what I would understand to be the key to the entire book of Psalms. So it's usually translated as blessed is the man. There are some translations which will render it blessed is the person or something like that. I like blessed is the man because the Hebrew is ashrei ha'ish. So in Hebrew, if you're just referring to kind of a generic person, you wouldn't use ish because ish is the word for a male, for a man. And since the earliest days of the church, when that opening of Psalm 1 was understood, it was understood not to be just kind of in reference to a generic person or even to a generic Israelite, but in reference to actually to the person, to the man, Jesus Christ, who is the key of David. So that's kind of the way we began this discussion about what exactly the implications of Psalm 1 are. So right away, I mean, the opening words are directing you toward the one that not just Psalm 1 is about, but really the one that all of the Psalms, in one way or another, are going to be focused on, and that is the Messiah. So that's one of the first things to bear in mind. And that, of course, was crucial for the way that the song developed, this understanding that the ish, the man who is blessed, is not just every man, but it's specifically the Son of God, the Messiah. Now, that doesn't mean, of course, that those who are in the Messiah are not also blessed. Of course we are. But we're focusing specifically in on that man, Jesus Christ, as the blessed one. And then we'll see as the psalm develops what characterizes him. Another thing to kind of keep in mind is that a lot of the psalms are structured so as to connect with the psalms around them. In fact, there's a lot of scholarly literature which, at least probably the last few decades, has begun to look at the structure of the Psalter. So it wasn't just like, at some point in time, somebody took the 150 Psalms like a deck of cards and just kind of shuffled them. And, oh, look, well, let's put this one here, we'll put that one there. No, it was a very carefully organized lexical as well as thematic cohesion to the systematic way in which the Psalms were put together. A lot of people know that, for instance, the Psalter is divided into 5 different books. Okay, well, that's fine. But within those books, you also have things that join certain groups of Psalms together. Now, Psalm 1 and Psalm 2, almost in all the scholarly literature, are understood to be a unit. So even though they're 2 Psalms, you can't, they're 2 halves of really this same psalmic unit, we might call it. And that is obvious from a number of features. First of all, you have an overlap of language. So I mentioned that Psalm 1 begins, Ashrei ha'ish. Ashrei in Hebrew is blessed. And that's the same word that occurs at the end of Psalm 2. So Psalm 1 begins with Ashrei, blessed is the man. Psalm 2 ends with Ashrei, blessed are those who take refuge in him. So there's a singular focus about this blessed man at the beginning of Psalm 1, and there's a more of a corporate focus at the end of Psalm 2. So blessed are all of these people who take refuge in this one man. Also, there's overlap between this language about meditating. So blessed is the man who doesn't walk in the counsel of the wicked or stand in the path of sinners or sit in the seat of scoffers. So he doesn't do those things, but what does he do? Well, he meditates in the Torah. Now, the Hebrew word for meditate is hagah. And it kind of denotes this almost a murmuring at times. So it's just like the word of God is in your mouth, and it's spilling forth as you meditate upon it. You're murmuring, you're meditating upon these words. That same word, translated in most versions as meditate, is also repeated at the beginning of Psalm 2, but it's used in a different sort of way there. It's where the nations who are opposed to the Lord, they plot in vain. So plot is the same Hebrew verb. It's translated meditate in Psalm 1, plot in Psalm 2, both are hagah. So the nations they're meditating, but they're meditating in a vain, empty sort of way. They're meditating upon how they can rebel against God, whereas the Son of God is meditating upon his Father's word. So those are some of the connections between the two. There's one more that I think is especially crucial, and that is that when this Ish, this man, is talked about in Psalm 1, then he reappears in Psalm 2, but we learned a lot more about him. We learned what he does and doesn't do in Psalm 1, but we learn more about actually who he is in Psalm 2. He is the king, and he is the Son of God. Today I have begotten you, Psalm 2 says. And then he is also the Mashiach, which in Hebrew is Messiah. He is anointed of God. So you put Psalm 1 and 2 together, and you look at both of them, and you're like, oh, okay, I see that this blessed man of Psalm 1, who avoids all these wicked things and meditates upon the Father's word, and who's this fruitful tree, unlike the kind of the chaff of the wicked, he is also the king. He is the anointed of God, and he is the son of the Father. So all of them, of course, that's such richness to understand that right away, the first thing we hit here is the blessed man. And that Christological, that Christ-centered nature of Psalm 1 kind of gives us the map whereby we can navigate our way through the rest of the book of Psalms and see how Jesus is, in one way or another, a variety of different ways, is going to be woven into the fabric of the entire book of Psalms.
That's awesome. Thank you, Chad. Well, great. So moving on from there. So Chad sends all this information to me. I'm very honored to get all this good stuff straight from the source. And from there, it's time to write this song. And Ben, tell the people what you were thinking when I reached out to you about doing this song together.
Man, I was just excited for a number of reasons. I think before I really was in touch with you, I was familiar with your other songs in the Psalm library, and we did Psalm 72, Long Live the King, and just love the idea, love the concept. I love bringing theologians and songwriters together. I thought that was such a cool thing. So just that in itself was really exciting to me. Finding out that Chad, you were going to be the contributing theologian, was just really exciting. So thanks so much for being on board. And the other thing that was kind of cool for me was when I look just in my own life and my own personal songwriting journey, I really credit my dad with kind of planting the songwriting seed early on, because when I was just like, I don't know, 9 or 10, my dad, that's when he started to do his own songwriting. And he had written poems before. He's a pastor, so he would incorporate some of those things in sermons and just in services in general. But he would write these songs for our family to sing during our own evening devotion times. And one of the most memorable ones that he wrote was on Psalm 1. And so that I didn't play music, I didn't sing, until high school, but those seeds of songwriting were planted very early. So when you approached me about doing Psalm 1, it just kind of felt like this, not full circle, but just a very cool, it was really, really special to me. So, yeah.
That's wild, man. That's such a cool story. So Ben and I got connected through the Songwriter Initiative, which is another initiative of the Center for Worship Leadership. And for the last couple years, Ben's been a part of that and just writes incredible songs. And so I thought of Ben for this song immediately as I was starting to think about the nature of how it would come together. And Ben has just a ton of energy, always has great hooks, just really interesting melodic lines. And for me, as more of someone who's just obsessed on the words, I knew it would be a great fit for this song. And I thought it would work well together, but we had never written a song together, I don't think. So it was a risk, but I knew it would go well, and I'm super happy with it. So let's give you the rundown of kind of how this song got crafted. But before we do that, why don't you listen to a little bit of Psalm 1.
Blessed is that man who did not walk in the wisdom of this world. Yeah. Blessed is that man who never faltered. Now blessed is that man who set his heart on the teachings of the Lord. And blessed is that man who knew his Father. He's like a tree down by the living water, strong and tall he stands. He's evergreen, blooming on every branch. Blessed is that man.
So about 6-7 months ago from when we're recording this podcast, last June, I sent Ben kind of a basic framework for verse 1, which really kind of took Psalm 1 just straight out of word for word. But I had an idea for kind of the feel of the song and how that verse would sound. Just kind of got the wheels in motion there. Ben and I live in Scottsdale, Arizona, so we're a long ways away, but thanks to technology, we can just send each other notes. So I sent him this idea and just as prep, and then a week later, once I sent Ben that idea, a week later I met with Chad, and Chad gave me all the rundown on the theology behind Psalm 1, all the goodies. And 2 days after that, I met with Ben, and we wrote over Zoom, and we drafted verse 1 chorus and verse 2 to start. And that was about as far as we got. Ben, do you remember anything fun from that first session?
It was really exciting. I just, having shared some of those ideas back and forth, and even just yesterday, Kip, you sending me I think you said the very first voice memo of like the conception of the idea was just fun to go back and listen to that. So, just hashing out some of those ideas. And there's, I don't know, Psalm 1 is just such a, like, it's already such, there's so much poetic language. There's just a lot of, there was a lot of things that had to be left on the cutting room floor. And so in some ways that's a cool thing to just have, just, you can have your pick on what you want to include in a song like this. So it was cool. Yeah.
Cool. So we finished that up. I sent Chad a rough draft and with a bunch of questions for Chad, and here are some of them. So, we said, hey, are you okay with the style and the melodic direction of the song? I said, do you have any suggestions lyrically on improving verse 1? Any thoughts on how to make sure the chorus communicates what Psalm 1:3 communicates, or at least the overall big idea of Psalm 1? And just trying to get a feel from Chad. Chad is a songwriter himself, and so even though he's not in the room with us in that moment, I mean, he's offering great ideas on the lyrics and what we could do there. Chad, do you remember your reaction to the first draft of the verse and chorus, just from a songwriting perspective?
Yeah, I thought it was excellent. I love the direction that it was going. I'm a big advocate, especially when it comes to songs that are based clearly upon a biblical text, as much as possible, as much as whether the meter or the rhyme or whatever it is allows to capture that biblical language, whether it's the metaphors or whether it's the actual verbiage of the biblical text. That way, first of all, the people that know it can make that connection. Like, oh yeah, I know Psalm 1, and I can hear it in this song. It's not the same, and it shouldn't be the same, but it's a nice coupling to that. So I mean, in my opinion, some of the best songs will do that. They'll take the biblical text and they'll creatively maybe mix some things up and add some of their own language, maybe even some kind of modern language and metaphors, in order to it gives a different perspective on the biblical text. A lot of biblical paraphrases will do the same thing. So I love the direction that it was going, and I could tell that it's going to be a great song just from the way that it began. Kind of this echo, but also a little bit tilt on a different spin on some of the language.
Awesome. Yeah, so we were stoked about that. We were happy Chad was digging it, and Chad was giving us, obviously giving us input on those verses. Try this verb here, this tense here. Hey, what if we did this? All good stuff. But one of the big things that happened was that question we asked about the bridge. Hey, where do you think this could go? And Chad, when we asked you about that, you gave us what currently essentially is the bridge now. Can you talk about the direction you took us on that bridge?
Yeah. So of course, Psalm 1 talks about uses the tree imagery, right? So he's like a tree, this blessed man, this son of God. He's like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in its season. Leaf doesn't wither. All of this. So you have a lot of imagery from nature. Well, my mind is constantly kind of back and forth between Old Testament and New Testament. So I love to make connections there, a bridge, if you will, between old and new. Yeah. And so I was thinking, what would pair well with this from the New Testament? This idea of a garden or a forest, some kind of tree imagery, and fruit bearing and all that sort of things. And my mind immediately went to the vine and the branches and the talk about us abiding in Christ, resting in Christ, connected with Him, receiving life from Him. And so I recommended that. I don't know the exact language that I used to recommend it, but I thought, this would be a nice counterpoint to that. We could develop the tree imagery and the fruit-bearing imagery with this abiding language that a lot of people are familiar with from the Gospel of John. So it clicked and kind of went from there.
That's awesome. Yeah, so I think, again, one of the things about working with a theologian is obviously great ideas are one thing. So that was a great idea, but also permission giving, right? So when you gave us this idea to connect to the John passage, not only was it a great idea, but it was like, okay, Chad has explained to us kind of what the tie-in is here, how this flows with Psalm 1 and the direction that Psalm 1 takes us. And so all of a sudden we have this permission now to connect Old Testament and New. We have this deep understanding of it as songwriters, deeper because of Chad, so that we can now go and say, with kind of with reckless abandon, go, let's take this imagery, which is very familiar imagery to folks who are familiar with the Bible. And so it was just kind of a really easy connection that we could make. So Ben, we kind of went back and forth on that. And one of the things that you hear in the song is a fun little interplay on the bridge. We're going to play that for you right now.
He is the vine, we are the branches. We will abide and we will grow. You sing. He is the vine, we are the branches. We will abide and we will grow. He is the vine, we are the branches. We will abide and we will grow. He is the vine, we are the branches. We will abide and we will grow.
All right, so we hear that echo going on in there. Ben, that was all your idea. It's a super fun hook. Tell us what happened.
Let's see. I remember we made the decision. Okay, this is the direction we're going with the bridge. And I remember, Kip, you just sent me this. Basically, the first half of the bridge as it is. He is the vine, we are the branches. And so we were like, that's such a great. Let's use that. And then we weren't sure like what we wanted to say for the second half, but there's another song that I really love. It's called "So Good to Me" by Corey Asbury, and in their bridge, I kind of just ripped off this idea of they do this call and response thing with these O's, and I just love that, and it goes over really well at our church, and it's just fun. So I basically took that idea and inserted it after those couple lines, because we knew we wanted to say something about growth or, abiding, so it just kind of worked out. And I think we even went back and forth a little bit on, do we want to change, do we want to continue to write new words for the bridge, or do we want to just stay with repeat those, that same phrase? And we ended up just repeating it, and I'm glad we did. Just it adds simplicity, and it's memorable, and it's a great message, He's the vine, we're the branches, we'll abide and we'll grow, Just sort of like, this is who God is, and this is what, this is who we are now. So it's cool.
Yeah. Well, hey, writing songs, creating art, it's all about ripping other people off. So, whether we do it subconsciously or not, there's nothing new under the sun, right? So we're always, it's great that you just, again, as we were taking time writing this song, there's time for us to be, listening to other stuff, and all of a sudden an idea comes where you're like, oh, this is a great participatory thing for a congregation. This song's really fun. Let's make it even more fun by adding this kind of hook that's an echo thing. And so we hope congregations are going to have fun with that, or camps, or wherever you are. Mm-hmm. Chad, anything to add just after we've added that bridge now, just with that connection once again and how it fits now with our chorus?
Yeah, the only thing I would kind of underscore is how music like this is my biblical interpreter speaking here. I love how music like this, then it becomes, whether we even realize it or not, it becomes a teacher. As we listen to the song, it teaches us how to read the scriptures. So if you're hearing the language of Psalm 1, you're hearing the language of John, and these two are not two separate things, but now they become one poetic flesh in this song. All of a sudden you're like, oh, well then, I also then, when I hear this in Psalm 2, connect it with this in the New Testament, or hear this in Psalm 3 and connect this in the New Testament. So it it ends up being in not only just beautiful music and beautiful lyrics, but it also becomes a very helpful tool for teaching us how to read the scriptures. So that when you hear this song, you're like, oh yeah, well that's kind of cool the way they put these two things together. Let me see how the scriptures imitate the same thing, and then how I can do the same thing in my own teaching and reading of the scriptures.
Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so cool. Let's talk chorus, okay? So we got the bridge. We had verses, we had a chorus, we had a bridge, but we kind of knew the chorus just wasn't quite there yet, right? There's not a ton we changed. There's certainly some significant changes we made, looking back, but we needed to make some of these final adjustments, and it wasn't until November, several months later, at which point I knew we were going to record in January, and I knew our chorus was not 100%. So Ben, you remember how this chorus session went down? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I was looking back at what our original chorus was involving, and I think originally we really wanted to include some of these elements on what do we receive from the tree, as using the tree analogy. And so we were including some of these themes about rest and about fruit. And the chorus itself it's so short. And we're getting to the point where, okay, this is the chorus. This is how many lines we have. It's very finite. It's only like, I don't know, 6 or 8 or something like that. And so we had to kind of just nestle into, like, what is the course going to be about, because we just can't include everything that we would like to. And I think we just kind of simplified it, and we just really committed to the tree analogy, and less about, what is it that we receive from a tree, even, things like rest and fruit and, shade, We included some of those things, like in verse 2, which is cool. I'm super glad we did. And like, Kip, your vocal line is just so fun on that verse 2, talking about that shade and finding rest and stuff. But we moved away from that for the chorus, just to really commit and focus in on just this tree analogy, as Christ. And I think it really just helped. It just brought cohesion to it, and I think it's way stronger now, So
yeah, it's wild. I think it actually didn't take us very long. I feel like it took like 20 minutes, and we were like, oh. Yeah. And it's interesting. I wonder if the time away from it, coming back to it, a lot of times as songwriters, we just get so in the weeds of it, and then we've got to get it done. But having that time to step back into it and look at it as a listener, as a consumer, gives you that perspective to go, okay, this is what it needs. And we just kind of moved a couple of lines and, like you said, simplified it. And I was like, oh, that's it. So, so there you go. We won't
simple as good
give you any more secrets away. But no. Chad, any thoughts on the chorus as it stands, as it was?
Well, I tell you, the image of the evergreen is what captured me. It's just like a one-word encapsulation of a lot of what is communicated in the song, where it's just whether you want to say it's ever fruitful or evergreen or ever shade providing or ever living. I mean, in other words, it's not he's not a seasonal kind of blessed man, our Messiah. Mm-hmm. He's ever gracious, ever merciful, ever life-giving. So that works perfectly with the way that you've woven this language into it about the evergreen tree.
That's awesome. That's good to hear, because Ben kept trying to cut that word. So anyway, we'll move on. No, that was honestly, Chad. That was one of the words that we liked a lot, but it wasn't in the right spot originally, with the way it needed to be. And so I was really hoping we could figure that out, and we did. And then it was just like, oh my gosh, I think we're here. So I appreciate you saying that. That's awesome.
Sometimes you have to play musical chairs with the words, it seems like. Yeah. I mean, you want the word there, but it doesn't fit there, it doesn't fit there. So you just kind of shift things around, and you're like, that's where it belongs, right there.
It kind of served the rhyme scheme too a little bit, because I remember our first couple drafts of the chorus, it was like it didn't really rhyme so much, but we were kind of okay with it. But like you said, playing musical chairs, just like Tetris a little bit.
Yes.
And everything fell into place, and it was like, oh, it rhymes. We got the words in that we want, and all right, good deal.
Awesome. Yeah, so just a few more things here, a few more questions, some fun stuff. Last thing, kind of before the recording process, there were little things, little tweaks we're making right up until recording. You know, I'm always just poring over every detail before that thing. Once it's recorded, that's it, right? So I'm bugging Ben every other day. Hey, what about this? What should we do? And, you know, and I think we got it figured out. But I just remember the morning of the recording, I called Ben up to my hotel room. He's eating waffles down at the Hampton Inn. He's like, man, I got to finish my waffles. I'm like, all right, but we only have so much time.
It's go time, Ben. What are you doing?
Yeah,
got to get my waffle.
Like, I mean, who doesn't want waffles when you're on the road? So I called him in and I said, hey, what do you think about for verse 1? We had "Blessed is the man," right? Because we were taking it straight from the translation we were working from, right? And the song itself in the chorus is "Blessed is that man," right? Because we want to point to Jesus as being the man. And one of the things that had happened in the process of writing this is we played it for a few people. And it seemed like people were a bit confused as to not necessarily understanding we were talking about Jesus until maybe all the way through the song, or even until it was kind of too late, if you're just kind of listening casually, right? And we've been thinking a lot about how to make verse 1 just kind of help a little bit with that understanding. And so I brought up the idea to Ben, hey, what if we had all these "blessed is the man" statements in verse 1. Let's change those to "that man." So I think that'll help just frame it a little bit more clearly, just give a little more nudge for folks to understand what we're talking about up front. Ben, do you remember what happened there in the hotel?
Hey, yeah, I can't say I was totally surprised. I love that you, Kip, you love to, even to the last second, even when it means you have to interrupt my breakfast, my waffle time. I'm just kidding. No, it's really good. I think it was a great change. I remember exactly what you're talking about. We shared it with another member of the Songwriter Initiative, and she was, listening to the song, she was enjoying it, and we asked her, okay, did you kind of pick up that we're singing about Jesus? And she was like, oh, not really, and no fault to her. Like, I think it was just the way that the words were at that time. But it gave us some clarity on, okay, we probably need to help firm up this idea just to help people understand who it is that we're singing about. So I thought it was a good change. Just,
if you look at, if you're sitting there looking at the lyrics and you're listening and you're very focused on what's going on, like, okay, you'll understand it. But, we want to make sure that even casually listening, we're giving every chance we can to people understanding who this is about. Yeah, it was just a little tiny change we made, and just thought people would think it was interesting. Yeah. Hey, jury's out. Give us your feedback, folks. Was that story interesting? Let us know. All right, so Ben, you had a couple of questions for me. This is called Fun Question Time with Ben. You had a couple questions you wanted to throw out there as we wrap up here. With Ben. Yeah.
Yeah. The first question is. So, Kip, you sent me, you gave me the invitation to work on this song with you, and then I feel like pretty soon after that, you sent me this Stevie Wonder song as sort of the reference track for the song. The song's called "Boogie On Reggae Woman," if our listeners are interested in checking it out. Amazing song. Yeah. But can you just talk about, what kind of prompted you to choose that particular song, that style of music, to go in this direction for the next Psalm Library project?
Yeah, so, the song's not for everybody's ears, for sure, but so use caution. But, just to take you back, I did my master's in theology, and I did my thesis on Luther's theology of music. So I did a deep dive into his everything he thought about music, which he was a big lover of it. And one of the things that I found was his willingness to use all different kinds of music, all different kinds of settings in order to get the gospel across to people. And so in that freedom, I really listen to all different kinds of music. I'm just a music lover, and I love Stevie Wonder. I love so many different genres. But this song, Boogie on Reggae Woman, has always been one of my it's kind of my favorite Stevie Wonder song. It's just a random song. It's not really a hit necessarily, but I just love the groove. I love the feel of it. And so what happened was, reading the psalm, when I see I find kind of a lyric, I'll read a text like Psalm 1, I'll read a line, and I hear in my head, like kind of immediately, just like what it should sound like singing it, right? And so when I said, blessed is a man who did not walk in the wisdom of this world, it was just like, blessed is the man who, and once that came to me, I thought, what is that? Like, what is that feel? What is that style? And I just kind of immediately connected it to that. And so once I kind of had it in my head that this was Boogie on Reggae Woman, but, for Jesus, there was no turning back on that. And so throughout the entire process, it was just like, in my head, it was that feel, it was that groove, it was that vibe. So, yeah, maybe we'll cut this part out.
So
all right, you had one more question, but
I'll never be able to.
Chad,
I'll never be able to hear Psalm 1 without picturing Stevie Wonder. No.
Yeah, there you go. Check it out.
It's not a bad connection to make. It isn't.
Yeah, there you go.
That's pretty cool.
So let's see. One last question before we wrap this whole thing up, Ben.
Cool. Yeah. So this is just talking. We've really focused on the tree analogy. In my mind, the chorus is sort of the centerpiece of the song, and it's all about the tree. And there's so many dimensions to a tree analogy, and we kind of touched on this, but choosing which language to focus on, it was a fun challenge, and we ended up not using language that talked about like fruit, per se, or a garden. We ended up not talking about the cross, which is another way to look at tree language. So, Kip, is there any other insight that you can give on just why we went in the lyrical directions that we did?
Yeah, I think the tree one is probably the most interesting, because you and I talked about it as we were going through this tune. I mean, it's pretty hard to not talk about a tree and talk about Jesus and not talk about the tree that he died on. I mean, it's just like, how do you sing about Jesus and a tree and not mention the cross, right? But I think that goes back to, and I'll kind of push to Chad here, with what the psalm is all about, right? Chad, so just, can you just again kind of wrap this up in terms of the tree in this passage and Jesus' connection to it, and why we, in sort of keeping true to the psalm, we were sticking in that metaphor.
There's of course, if we wanted to go to the direction of the tree and the cross, it would have been fine. But the tenor of the psalm tends to accent not kind of the sacrificial character of his death, but it's really focused upon the vivifying nature of the tree. So it's producing life constantly, and this idea of a life-giving tree, it harkens back to the Garden of Eden, where you have the tree of life. It harkens forward to Ezekiel's vision, where he sees this end-time temple and a river of life coming from it, and there's trees growing on either side of it that are trees of life. Revelation 22 talks about it the same. So there's a very broadly canonical Genesis to Revelation focus upon trees as bearing life, and that's reflected in the psalm. And so I think the direction that we went with it's perfect, because it fits with not just the tenor of Psalm 1, but also with Genesis and Ezekiel and Revelation also.
Well, thank you guys again for joining me today. Thanks for your time on this podcast. Thanks for the time we spent this last year putting this song together. It was an absolute blast to write it. We hope y'all enjoy the song. We'll see you for the next psalm.